Welcome to Fridays with Frazier, day 11 of the 2021 school year. Today is our first distance learning day and we are really excited. Keep in mind that there was a calendar change that we went 4 days in and 1 day on Fridays was going to be our distance learning day. This is our practice day. We distributed devices, 3,600 to be total, to give you a total. If you don't have your device, by the way, today would be a good time to go ahead and contact your administrators. They are in the building. Please do so, and maybe you could go by and pick up your device. The distance learning day today, teachers are available, and we should be doing our distance learning. Hopefully everything will go smoothly. If not, again, I will say this, please make sure you contact your administrator. This is our first distance learning day. There will probably be some bumps in the road, but that's why we're doing this. So that we can practice and so that we can get better and better each and every time that we have to do distance learning. So again, day 11, we've had 10 days in traditional school. And so now I think it's a good time that we can talk a little bit about what's been on everybody's minds over the past 175 days, which is COVID. So what I'd like to do is spend a little bit of time answering some questions, talk to you about procedures and protocols, what you can and can't expect, what we've been through over the last 10 days, and then possibly what you can expect into the future. One of the questions that is on everybody's minds is, have we had positive cases? Have we had quarantines? And the answer to that question is, yes, we have. That was expected. We were prepared for that. We have district contact tracers. We have done what I believe is a very thorough job in contact tracing. We've been very good to act on it immediately. Timing is critical when you do contact tracing. So kind of want to walk through procedurally what that will look like here in a minute and kind of explain that a little bit further. Also, what we have created for the district is a dashboard, a COVID dashboard. That's something that's going to be on the website. It's on there currently right now. You can see it. And that is so that we can be transparent of what actually is going on within the district. We don't want to make telephone calls every single time an incident occurs, but we are certainly tracking that data and we are on top of that. So in order to do that and to make that data available to you, weekly we will be posting COVID data, and it will be by site. And it is divided into student and staff so that you will be able to identify at what site and whether it was a student or a staff member. Obviously, there's no names on that. It is data only. It is numbers only. We will give you year-to-date totals, and we will also, as this progresses, we will also do weekly updates. So you'll know what happened in the past week, also what that number looks like year-to-date. So within the dashboard, it is divided by quarantines and cases. So let's define what that means. So what is a case? A case is an identifiable positive COVID case that has been confirmed by testing. So once that is identified and that information is given to us, we begin to track that immediately. On the other columns is quarantine. So what does quarantine mean? Well, quarantine can mean a couple of things. We have used quarantine as mostly a precaution, and we're going to err on the side of caution always. So when we look at a quarantine, we're talking about a possibility even. So let's say that there's somebody in my house that has been sick. Let's say a mom or a dad has been ill, and they decide to go out and get tested. So when we are identified with that information, when they contact the school district, what we are asking you to do is please quarantine your students at that time, even though there hasn't been a positive case identified, and even though we don't have anything specific to deal on, it's potentially a quarantine or a positive case. So it's a potential quarantine. So that's in that column of quarantines. Also the same thing with a potential case. If someone has themselves been ill, let's say a student or a staff member has been ill and they feel like they need to go tested, once we are given that information, we are quarantining them, keeping them out of the building, and we are considering that a quarantine until we get the test results. If the test is negative, then they're able to come back. That data, however, is still in the dashboard. And then there's quarantine. I definitely have been in close contact with a positive case. So if I've been in close contact with a case, then I am absolutely quarantined. So those are the three things that make up the columns when you see staff or student quarantine. So again, the dashboard is divided by site, by student, divided by student and staff. And also there are statistics at the bottom. There are percentages. Those are important percentages. That's kind of the data that we're going to use as we start to track all the quarantines or the cases. I think that gives you a really good idea of what's going on within each building and also the school district itself. The dashboard will be updated every Tuesday by 5 o'clock. And once again, there will be a year-to-date dashboard, and we will also be giving a weekly activity dashboard as well. Okay, so now let's talk about the actual protocols that we go through once we get a phone call that says, hey, there's a positive case. I believe this is probably what is on everybody's minds right now. What is the school doing? What are we doing? What does it look like? So let me walk through that really quickly. Once we get a call that says, hey, Jimmy is positive COVID, immediately we begin to contact trace. We have contact tracers within the district, and what that means is that we are immediately finding out who that individual was around. We're going to find out when their symptoms are. If they're asymptomatic, what day were they tested? If they had symptoms, they're going to be infectious 2 days prior to that time period. So we will go back to that time period and we'll begin to ask questions in regards to where were you in close contact with, and we'll begin to make those phone calls. That is the process and the procedure of contact tracing. So if you are, for example, in a classroom with somebody and there was a positive case and you weren't contacted, and let's say that this person was positive, but you didn't get a phone call. Well, the reason you didn't get a phone call is because through contact tracing, you weren't deemed as a close contact. So you didn't need to be quarantined. Only those individuals that are considered close contact are going to be contacted when we do our contact tracing. And that will be the only person affected and quarantined. Yeah, one of the important things about the contact tracing component is timing. It is incredibly important that once you get a result or once you think you have a situation, please contact the school. Please contact an administrator. At that moment in time, the administrator will be able to direct you on what you need to do and what we need to do as a school district. In order for contact tracing to work effectively, it has to be timely. It is very, very important. So if we get our information 5, 6, 7 days late, it's not going to help in mitigating the spread of the virus. So if we get that information quickly, then we can immediately act upon that, quarantine who needs to be quarantined, isolate who needs to be isolated, and then we can help mitigate the virus. Great question. So what happens if we have a sibling that has a positive case within the household? And here's what we do. If you are living with a positive case, then everyone is going to be considered in close contact. So all of those individuals are going to have to be quarantined. So quarantine is basically just being safe and staying away from others. It doesn't mean that you have it. It doesn't mean that you're infectious. It means that potentially you have the virus. So in order to, again, mitigate the spread of the disease, we simply want to stay away from people. Obviously, you have to live within your household, but wearing a mask, distancing yourself is still a great idea. So the difference between isolation and quarantine is when you isolate when you are a positive case. In other words, you have been deemed to have the virus. You've went to the doctor, you've went to the clinic, and you have a positive test. So at that moment in time, you need to isolate from everybody. So you need to go into a bedroom, you need to close the door, and you need to isolate yourself from all other people within the household. Quarantine is kind of a funny thing. So quarantine is a 14-day time period. Quarantine starts from the last contact of the positive case. So if you were with Uncle Jimmy and Uncle Jimmy got his test on Thursday, but you weren't with Uncle Jimmy, let's say you were with him on Tuesday and he was still infectious that day. Your last contact date was Tuesday. Your 14 days would begin on your last contact with the positive case. Absolutely. One of the things that we're asking is please, once you are being quarantined, you need to make sure that you contact your administrators and your school. The responsibility of the school district is this. Once we have a case, we, by law, contact the state health department, and we also identify the number of quarantines with which we have. It works both ways. The reality is contact the school as soon as you know something. That way we will begin immediately. And that crossover time period between whether or not the health department contacts us or we contact the health department, every time it's identified to us, we will always contact the health department. Again, when we talk about the assignments and the ability to be able to still service our children, I think that that's one of the reasons why we handed out the devices. It's the reason why we changed the academic schedule to 4-in-1, because we absolutely knew that quarantines and isolation was going to be part of the school year. So if you are quarantined or if you are isolated, your learning still continues. You have a device, you will go immediately to distance learning and you will not miss any type of teaching or instruction, and learning should continue and there really should be seamless. It's a good question, and we're getting ready to get into some interesting times. If you don't feel well, we have said, please stay at home. It doesn't mean that you have COVID. But if you are symptomatic at all, if you have a sore throat, if you have a fever, of course, stay at home. But if you're not feeling well, stay at home, monitor your symptoms. If the symptoms go away immediately the next day, is it okay to come to school? The answer is yes, as long as you don't have fever. But please, I want to emphasize, if you don't feel well, stay at home. This year is an interesting year when it comes to attendance, and we certainly are going to be very flexible with our attendance. The ability for us to be able to pivot to distance learning and for our students to have their devices has made that even easier. So once again, if you don't feel well, please make sure that you stay at home. Okay, great question. If you think that someone possibly has COVID, if you've been exposed to somebody that thinks they have COVID, then you should treat that like a positive COVID case. Keep them at home, quarantine them immediately. Why is that important? Well, because if you do in fact find out later that that individual does in fact have COVID, then again, the last exposure, the last time that you were exposed to that COVID, that's when your quarantine date starts. So if you immediately start to quarantine, then that means you get to come to school earlier and your quarantine period won't be as long. Again, I just want to say thank you for everything that our students have done. Our parents have been wonderful as far as compliance. I still want to emphasize the importance of wearing a mask. I want to, let's not let our guards down. I think it's important that we continue to socially distance, and also hand hygiene is critically important. But we've had some great first days. And again, everything that we've experienced, we've dealt with. We were expecting this, and hopefully we can continue on a daily basis just to get through with your help. And I think it's gone well. Thank you so much. So not only is this Friday our first distance learning day, but also it's the return of a rivalry, the Rogers County rivalry with the Oologah Mustangs. Tonight at 7 o'clock, we'll be traveling up the road. It's my understanding that the principal at Oologah has challenged the principal at our high school, Miss Garut, that the loser has to wear the t-shirt of the other school. So go Zebras! Tonight, Oologah, 7 o'clock. As always, It's a great day to be a zebra.